It's 11 o'clock, so let's get going. My name's Cinda Ball. I'm a Vice President of Marketing and Recruiting at Fundamental Labor Strategies. I believe most of the people on the call know us, but if anybody doesn't, Fundamental's been in business for 3 decades. We supply outsourced extra and replacement drivers to our clients, and our specialty is really in the line of matching our drivers' skills to the operational needs of our clients. And now I'm going to turn it over to Jeff Muntz, who's our Vice President of Operations, who's going to introduce the Lehigh Valley Traffic Club.
Good morning, everyone. And I want to thank everybody for attending what is going to be a very informative webinar. And thank you to Priscilla for offering to share this vital information with the group. As Cinda mentioned, I am the VP of Operations for Fundamental Labor, and I'm also on the Board of Directors for the Lehigh Valley Traffic Club and have been for at least the last 5 years, I believe. The Lehigh Valley Traffic Club is the oldest professional group dedicated to all modes of transportation and supply chain in the Lehigh Valley. We host educational seminars, networking events, annual golf outings, and our membership consists of professionals and allied partner professionals who come together to share knowledge and ideas. If anybody has any questions about the Lehigh Valley Traffic Club, or for that matter, even Fundamental Labor Strategies, you can reach out to me at any time. All right, at this time, I'll hand it back to Cinda.
Great. I'm sure we're all happy too. The weather's looking up, the snow's melting, and it's warmer here. So we appreciate everybody taking time out of their day to join us. We do have a regular seminar program that some people are familiar with, but obviously this year we're turning to webinar. And I wanted to just introduce Conversion. We first met Conversion by going to their amazing recruiting and retention conference that they hold every year in Nashville. And obviously they're not holding it this February. So the next best thing was to reach out and ask them to partner with us to bring us information about the driver market. Definitely a #1 concern of all of us. So Conversion's the leading recruiting and retention agency, and they're specifically dedicated to the trucking industry. So I'd like to formally introduce Priscilla Peters, who's the Vice President of Marketing and Training for Conversion.
All right, thank you guys so much. I'm glad it's warm up north today because maybe my Southern accent will kind of fit in. But I'm excited about being with you guys today, and I really appreciate the opportunity to come and share. And hopefully I can give you some good information that you can take back to your teams and work with when it comes to recruiting drivers in today's market. I will say I've been in trucking, in driver recruitment, in some form or fashion for about 23 years. And to be honest, I'm not sure I've ever seen it as competitive as it is today. We'll look at some of that as we go into this, but we are in a very competitive market for truck drivers today, as I'm sure you're all aware as you're in the business and you know that. But here's some things that we're going to cover today. So the first thing I'm going to go over is just really share with you some driver opinions and behaviors, some things that are going on in the driver market, like what do they care about today? What are they talking about today? What's important to them that may be of value to you? We do lots of driver surveys. We partner with lots of companies that talk to drivers and have conversations with drivers. And obviously we help carriers recruit and retain drivers from a recruitment advertising standpoint. So we have lots of data behind that too. So hopefully some of the information I'm going to share today will be helpful for you. We're also going to look at what we call the driver persona, just because I think it's really critical when you're looking at that, and I'll explain that a little bit more. And then we're going to take a deep dive into the Northeast driver market and just give you some data that we have that you can take back to your teams, and we'll just give you a good picture of what you're looking at in your specific market. So I'm going to dive right in here. First of all, I want to share with you some data from a driver survey that we did in November of last year. So this is fairly recent. And we asked drivers just simply, how do you prefer to get paid? The reason we did this is because there's lots of chatter in the driver market right now about guaranteed pay. And I don't know if we had started talking about that before the pandemic, but now it's become a much bigger conversation that we've seen drivers talking about. When we work on actually posting jobs for our clients, one of the things that we tell them is if you have any sort of quote unquote guarantee in place, we recommend that you put that in the job posting. And so for decades, most carriers have used a pay per mile model, right? But drivers are really saying, and you can see by the data here on your screen, that they prefer a guaranteed pay model. Now, this doesn't mean that carriers are just completely moving away from the pay per mile model. In many cases, what they're doing is they're guaranteeing a specific amount of miles, or they're just doing it in a different way to where the driver feels a little more secure in what he's going to get paid, so that mama knows, how am I going to pay the bills, and how am I going to understand exactly and plan my household income. And so I think the most important takeaway from this for you guys is, no matter how you prefer to pay a driver, one of the things that we see is that how you communicate that is critical. So drivers have tons of issues when it comes to pay. That's one of the main reasons that they leave a carrier. But honestly, it's not always just because like they don't make enough money. It's because they don't understand their pay stub. They don't, they don't understand how they actually, get paid on certain routes and not on others. And so it's really important that you communicate that effectively and make sure that drivers really understand how you're getting paid. So we took it one step further because there were so many drivers that said, hey, I prefer a guaranteed pay model, that we asked them, okay, what are your opinions related to that? So when we're talking about guaranteed pay, what are some of your opinions? Now, they could choose more than one answer here, but you'll see that the two things that really stood out here were that they expect the guarantee to be easily attainable. So in some cases, we've seen where carriers are saying, oh, we're offering this amazing guaranteed pay package, but you have to meet this long laundry list of qualifications to get that guaranteed pay. That's not really what the driver has in mind. They want to make sure that it's attainable during their regular hours of service, and they expect to be paid for guaranteed miles even if they haven't driven those miles. That's a caveat. So that was about 47% of them said that. That's kind of a new trend that's happening with drivers. So if you set up a guaranteed pay model and you say, okay, I'm guaranteeing you this many miles, they expect to be paid on those guaranteed miles even if they don't drive them. So we just kind of took it a step further there. Also want to let you guys know before I go on to this next slide, if you do have a question as we're going through any of this information, feel free to type it. There's a Q&A tab in your Zoom window. Feel free to type your questions there, and we'll take those as we go. Another kind of interesting bit of data that came out of our driver survey late last year was that 64% of drivers said that a sign-on bonus is not a determining factor. Now, this is something that you need to keep in mind. Just because they're saying it's not a determining factor doesn't mean that it's not necessarily an expectation. So I think it's really critical when you're looking at, do we offer a sign-on bonus? Do we not? It's really important to decipher between what the driver's expectations are and what their determining factors are. So maybe you don't offer a sign-on bonus, so that's not necessarily a determining factor. But I also think, on the other hand, whether good or bad, as an industry, we have actually trained the driver in a lot of cases to expect a sign-on bonus. For some of them, I think it is an expectation, and it's one of those things that it doesn't determine. Like, there's some carriers that their sign-on bonus is, I'm talking $20,000, and some it's $1,500. So I think it's more of an expectation, and what are you, for your organization, what works for you. But keep in mind that just because it's not a determining factor doesn't mean that it might not be expected. And I know that's kind of like vague, weird language, but when it comes to drivers and what they want, if they're looking at your job postings and they're looking at your job opportunities, in some cases they do expect a sign-on bonus, even though it's not like the determining factor about whether they go to your carrier or not. Also, we got some data from our friends at Professional Driver Agency. They have thousands of calls and conversations with drivers every month about their issues. They help carriers retain drivers who are 180 days or less with a carrier. And so they track what are the top driver issues and concerns. And so we got this data from them, and I think this is really interesting. When it comes to recruiting and retaining drivers, how you handle these issues and concerns are very, very important. So these are the top ones of the day. Now, I will say, when it comes to equipment, that's the top concern, even over compensation. And this is the latest data that's come from Professional Driver Agency. So this is very recent. Here's the thing when it comes to equipment. One of the things that they point out in their data is that equipment is 36% being the top reason, but they really feel like it's actually a bigger issue. Because what happens is when you drill down in conversations about compensation and operations, when we say operations, those issues are typically related to dispatchers, freight stability, things like that. Home time. When you drill down into some of these issues, equipment also comes into play there. So if you think about it, if a driver breaks down, maybe their truck continues to break down, and the equipment is an issue, it impacts their compensation, it impacts their home time, which then impacts personal things going on. And so equipment can actually impact a lot more than just, so I actually think that one's a little bit bigger. So that's just something to keep in mind. Personal reasons over the last several months, these have been mainly related to the pandemic, the need for drivers to be closer to home. We've seen that as kind of a common trend, but I think it's important to point this out. Now, under equipment, if you drill down and you see like, okay, well, equipment, that's kind of a broad issue. When they drill down and look at the data, some things that come to light are truck assignments. That's a big issue. So if you think about it, the first impression for the driver is the, what condition the truck is in when they're assigned the truck. So you don't want to give them a dirty tractor. You don't want to, give them a tractor that's got some components on it that are broken. So think about truck assignments really, really important. That's basically saying to them, this is how much I value you. I'm assigning you this truck and it's in amazing condition because I value you as a driver. There's a lot of carriers that actually don't hold that as a priority, and then they end up losing the driver over something as simple as the truck wasn't in great shape on truck assignment. So keep that in mind. Also, obviously, repairs and how long they're out and how long they're down, and that impacts lots and lots of things. But these are the top issues and concerns for drivers today. Another bit of data is we ask them, how do you prefer to consume information about new opportunities? And by new opportunities, we mean driving opportunities. So when you're looking for a new carrier to drive for, where do you go? And so there was some interesting data that came out of this. One of the biggest things for us was that online driver reviews really led the pack. Okay. Now keep in mind, drivers could choose more than one. Like they can say, I like to watch videos and I like to read blogs and I like to read driver reviews. But here's the interesting thing about this. 2 years ago, online driver reviews probably wouldn't have been number one. It would have been referrals, which don't get me wrong, referrals is still very high up there. But what's happening is as we are really kind of settling in as an industry into this mobile world that we live in, drivers are really interested in online driver reviews, what other drivers are saying about your carrier and other carriers regarding job opportunities. So in essence, when you think about it, it really is kind of like a driver referral, right? So it shouldn't really surprise us that online driver reviews are kind of leading the pack, but they are pretty significantly leading the pack. And so I just think it's important. So the takeaway here really is, okay, well, what does that mean for me? If I'm trying to hire drivers in today's market, you know, why do I really care that they're going to online driver reviews? And the reality is that there's some things you can do as a carrier to help build your online reputation. In our world, we call it your employer brand. But really, it's how do you manage your online reputation well? And that's a question I would pose to your folks within your organization and say, hey, are we looking at our driver reviews? Are we responding? Because one of the things that a lot of carriers do is they will, you know, they'll see some reviews from drivers, and maybe it's a negative review, and you're like, I'm not touching that with a 10-foot pole. Like, I don't even want to get in that conversation. But the reality is that doesn't look good to other drivers reading it. If you see a, you know, a negative review for your carrier, then you need to respond, and you need to let them know what you're doing about it, and thank you for sharing, even though it might not be pleasant. I mean, you have to make sure you respond. You have to make sure that you're monitoring all of your reviews. And when I'm talking about online driver reviews, these are in places like Facebook, Indeed, Google. And these are places where drivers are leaving online reviews, Glassdoor. There's lots of spots where they're leaving these online driver reviews. And so the important thing is that you're monitoring them, you're responding to them, and then you have some sort of strategy in place where you're encouraging the drivers in your fleet today who are content and who are happy with your carrier to say, hey, Joe, do you like working here? And Joe says, I love working here. Listen, do you mind going on Glassdoor and putting a review out there for us? Or will you go on Facebook and put a review? And so there's different systems and ways and solutions you can use to help with that. But what this data tells us is that's super duper important. And so make sure that you're paying attention to that. Obviously, there's lots of other things on this list, online job descriptions. When it comes to job descriptions, one thing to keep in mind is remember the data we just shared regarding issues that drivers have with pay or equipment or whatever that might be. In those job descriptions, be super specific about what you're offering. Because if they're kind of, you know, their bug list, if you will, if they're, the thing that bugs them is that, you know, I only get home on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, then put in your job description home weekends if you offer home weekends. I mean, you got to be specific. And so they're going, this data shows us they're going to those online job descriptions and driver reviews and videos and all the things, but we've got to make sure that we're showing up in the moments that count, right? That you are there and kind of in the mix, if you will. So speaking of driver reviews, I wanted to share with you some data. So we monitor for our clients that sign up for our online reputation management. We monitor thousands of driver reviews every quarter. And so I wanted to show you some data behind the latest driver reviews. So this shows you the top review keywords. So you can see whether it's a positive review or a negative review. These are the words, these are the keywords that our system pulls, that these are common keywords. What's interesting here is that when you kind of match this to those issues that we showed earlier from Professional Driver Agency, when they were talking to drivers, all those issues and concerns, it's about the same list, right? We got pay, we got communication, we got equipment. And so I just think it's interesting that the online driver reviews are matching what the other data shows. Also, one thing to keep in mind when it comes to truck drivers is they will typically rate you either very high or very low. So if a driver gives you a rating, chances are they're going to give you 5 stars or they're going to give you 1 star. And so they're real kind of polarizing when it comes to that. So there's not much in between. I mean, you can see they do leave some, 4 stars, but there's very few 2 and 3 stars. Most of the time they're going to be on one end of the spectrum. Obviously we hope it's the positive end, but this just gives you kind of a good high level overview of what online driver reviews look like today. This next snippet of data is, I think it's really, really important for, as an industry, for us to realize and understand that someone else is always recruiting your drivers. Now, this set of data shows that 32% of drivers said they receive recruiting info from 5 or more carriers a day. But let me tell you, the other 68% said, and we should have actually put this on the slide, the other 68% said that they hear from at least one carrier a day. So what that tells you is that if you employ truck drivers and you work with truck drivers in some capacity, you can be guaranteed that they are being recruited by someone else every single day. So that's pretty dramatic when you think about it. And the takeaway from that is we have to recruit our current fleet. So many times, I mean, and we work with carriers like this every day. We encourage them, listen, you have to invest in your brand and driver recruitment advertising and all the things. And we wholeheartedly believe in that. But the reality is that you're not just recruiting potential drivers for your fleet. You should always be recruiting your current fleet. And so I would encourage you, as you sit down with your teams and you work with the folks that work in almost every department within your organization, probably any department that touches a driver. So HR, your maintenance department, your operations folks, obviously your recruiters, anyone who has any sort of contact, encounters a driver in any way. Make sure they understand, as an organization, we're always recruiting, which means we are always selling our current drivers on our fleet. A lot of times carriers hire drivers and they're like, okay, he finished orientation, he's in a truck, I'm moving on. But you have to remember to constantly recruit your current fleet. It's super, super important. So we've kind of talked through some of the trends in the driver market. And now we're going to really go into what I call the driver persona. And I just want to hang out here for just a second and just talk to you about this, because I think that it's super important for organizations to identify the driver persona for your carrier. Now, what do I mean by that? What do you mean driver persona, Priscilla? What this means is, so the driver is going to personify different things, different traits, different feelings. He's going to exhibit different things depending on when he's satisfied and when he's not satisfied, okay? So this just kind of gives you what you see here is just a high level of, okay, when it comes to what a driver, what they have, what they feel, what their average day is, what their status is. When they're satisfied, these are ways they're feeling and what their average day looks like. And when they're not satisfied, this is what it looks like. So what I encourage you to do in your organization is sit down and identify two things. Number one, do an honest evaluation. Maybe you take this and this is really simple format. This can get a lot more robust and you can add more things to this. I just did like a super high level version of it here. But I would take this and say, okay, today, when a driver at, ABC Trucking, when they are satisfied, what do they have? And make a note. What do they feel like? Make notes. And what is their average day? What is the status? When they're not satisfied, what does that look like? And then I would do that and say, what do we think that looks like today? And then I would really sit down and ask your team, are we delivering on the experience that we're selling? And that's really important, because if you want the driver persona to be that I feel well compensated, like you want that to be, ideally that should be what your driver persona is. And in all reality, there's the driver persona that you want to have for your carrier, and there's the reality. And so you have to do a real gut check, honest evaluation and say, okay, What do we want it to be, and what is it actually? Because if you want them to feel like I'm well compensated, but you're not offering a pay package that's competitive in the market that you're hiring in, they don't feel that way. If you want them to feel like that dispatch is, organized and scheduled in a really efficient way, and they feel good about how they get their loads and things like that, you have to make sure that your operations are lined up in that fashion. And so I just think this is a super great exercise for organizations to do. It's something we do with our clients. It's something I would encourage you to do with your team, is go back and really look at what is the driver persona, what do we want it to be, and what is it actually today, and then what are some action items that we can put in place for that. Okay, so we talked a lot about the driver market, we talked about the driver persona, and now I'm going to dig into some data that we have on the Northeast driver market. Now, where we get this data is we partner with an organization that curates lots and lots of information relating to job postings for talent across the country, not just in trucking, they do it for all industries. They work with, they get information from the Department of Labor, they get it from all the job postings online. They curate lots and lots of data to provide us with the information that we get. And so this first is just kind of a high level look at the Northeast driver market. Now, this is what I will say. This market, and honestly, if you look at any market in the United States right now, just about, it's going to look super competitive. But the demand for truck drivers is very, very high in this market. So if you can see the numbers here, over 32,000 employee CDLA truck drivers, and over 900,000, there are over 900,000 unique job postings. Now, you might be saying, okay, Priscilla, hang on, hold the phone. There's 32,000 companies, and they're posting over 900,000 job postings for drivers. And the answer is, yep, they are. And I know it looks astounding, and you think, oh, she accidentally put a comma where it didn't go. But this is how competitive it is. Now, keep in mind, in most cases, these companies are posting jobs in every single zip code, in every single geographic area, for every single driver type. So there's lots and lots of job postings, and it's to the tune of over 900,000 in this particular market. 1 out of 10 of those positions are currently being filled. And this is from data from Q1 in 2021. Now, to put this in perspective for you, the next most sought after job in this market is for service operators for the oil and gas industry. And they only have 26,000 job postings. And then nurses is behind that with only 5,000. So the reality is that truck driver is the #1 most posted job in the United States of America. It almost doubles the second most posted job in the United States, which is nurses. So to say that we're living in a tight driver market that is highly competitive is the understatement of the century, okay? Now, we can get a little bit deeper here. When you look at this Northeast driver market, these are the top companies that are hiring in the market. You probably are like, yep, these are the usual suspects. But these are the top companies, these are the companies that have the most unique job postings in this market. And when we, again, remember, when we say unique job postings, we mean that's the individual job opportunities. Think multiple zip codes, multiple positions, driver types, geolocations, all the things. And then these are the top job titles. So this would tell me this is a competitive market for flatbed, okay? And so you can see how many, when it comes to job titles, people kind of title them differently. Some people might call it a CDLA truck driver, and then some might just call it a CDL truck driver. And so, but you can see kind of how this is outlined there. Next, and we're still in the Northeast market, okay? These are the top cities with driver job postings. So you can see this, all of these cities listed here. There may be some that show up on this list that you're surprised about. I doubt it. I'm sure you guys are probably looking at this list and going, yep, this kind of makes sense. But these are the top cities with driver postings. Remember, total versus unique. So total would be those unique job postings that we talked about. The total is the total number of all of those on all of the advertising platforms. So for example, if I need a CDL driver in Allentown and I post for a company driver there, then I'm going to post in all the zip codes around Allentown where I'm going to hire out of, right? And then I'm also going to post on multiple job boards, multiple places, multiple search engines. I'm going to post it on Indeed and Google, and maybe I go to HireMaster, maybe I go, that's where the difference in total versus the unique comes in, because the total is every job posting on multiple driver advertising platforms, okay? And then this next data is, lots of folks are interested in this, so I always pull this. This is the median advertised salary. Now, this is not saying this is what drivers specifically make in this market. It's saying what's advertised, okay? So over right around 70,000 in the Northeast driver market would be what the average would be. And so you can see, like, this is the number of postings, and then this would be the actual advertised salary here. So lots of folks are interested in this, so I always pull that when I'm looking at specific markets for folks. So this is the Northeast, but let's do a deeper dive. So maybe we want to look at one specific market. So let's look at Allentown. And we're kind of looking at the same metrics that we've just looked at for the Northeast. So the first, this is just high level number of employers competing. So there's about 969 employers competing for truck drivers in this market, 23,000 job postings, and about 6,300 of those are unique. Again, this is a super competitive market. I mean, when you're looking at just this specific area, you guys, this is, it's difficult to hire drivers in this market, and only 1 out of 10 of the positions are even being filled. That stayed true for the whole Northeast and for this specific market. And now, again, these are the top companies posting. This gives us a few more than the other one gave us, but you can see these are the companies that have the most job postings in this particular market. And then it gives you the total and the unique. So you can see this is what you're going up against in this market. There's lots and lots of carriers in this market that are looking for drivers. And then if you look here, again, I pulled the median advertised salary. But remember, advertised salary. This is what they're saying they pay drivers. I'm not saying they don't, but you and I know how the advertising salary is. And so this is an average. It's a little bit less. I think on the Northeast was 70.6. So it's a little bit less, but not much for Allentown. So that just kind of gives you a good picture of how competitive the market is. A lot of times it's hard for carriers to really kind of get their head around it, because we've been talking about the driver shortage for years, right? Well, now it's almost like this perfect storm of, now we've gone through a pandemic where we did lose quite a few drivers to the industry. We had, I think it was 40% of the drivers that normally join the industry joined in 2020 just because it was harder to get your CDL. Truck driving schools were shut down, and then they opened back up at minimal capacity. It was just different. So we didn't have as many coming in. And then now we have the Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse, which is taking out some drivers out of duty until they can fix what they've got going on with their Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse files. There's just lots of things that have gone on in the industry that now this market is so tight. And I have folks ask me all the time, because I've been saying for the past couple of months, I don't know that I've ever seen it this competitive. And they said, why do you think that? Well, because I'm seeing things happen that I haven't seen in my career. Like I've never seen private fleets say invest as much in drivers as they are today, because typically some of the private fleets, it was easier for them to recruit because, you know, they were more regionalized, or their home time was better, or even their pay was better in some cases. And they're investing lots more in drivers than they previously did, which tells us that the for-hire carriers, they're really struggling if the private fleets are really noticing that it's competitive. You know, just lots of things going on in the market. So hopefully that was helpful to give you kind of a good picture of that. Okay, we're going to wrap up today with just some key takeaways and action items. So I always like to end a webinar with, okay, that's all great and good, Priscilla, but what am I actually going to do with this information? So I'm going to challenge you. These are some takeaways and action items that I would encourage you to do with your teams. Number one, look at the driver persona and do it on a regular basis. Remember, we talked about the driver persona. Cinda and her team are going to have this presentation, and they can provide that to you here after the webinar. So you can kind of maybe just take that snippet of the driver persona, build that out however you would want. But I encourage you to go back to your teams, do an honest evaluation of what the driver persona is and what you actually want it to be, and then put together some action items to fill those gaps. So that would be the first takeaway. And then the second takeaway would be really make sure, and we didn't touch on this too much, but I want to make sure that I reiterate this. Communicate how the driver prefers to communicate. So do you remember that slide where it was like, you know, here's where I go to look for driving opportunities? Those were lots of different places, right? And this is what you have to do what you have to remember when you're recruiting drivers. If the driver lead comes in through Facebook, communicate with him through Facebook. If the driver lead, if you have a lead and he's communicating with you via text, you communicate with him via text. If he's communicating with you via email, email him. If he's calling you, call him back. It makes it more complicated for recruiting departments today because they have to have all of these different ways for recruiters to communicate with drivers. But the reality is the way the lead comes in is how you should communicate. So, and the way that the driver's engaging with you, whether it be text, email, phone, through social media, whatever that might be, communicate with the driver that way. That's how they prefer. So if you're trying to, you know, text the driver who doesn't want to text, you're not going to get him. He's not going to respond. And so really kind of keep that in mind. That's super important. And then the third one is encourage positive online reviews. We talked a lot about driver reviews. I cannot tell you, if there's one thing you leave today and you say, you know, what should we do? What's a good takeaway? This is the one I would grab. That's how important it is. Drivers are reading these reviews. They are leaving these reviews. You have to have some sort of strategy in place to be monitoring, to be responding, to be encouraging your fleet to leave a good review for you. I cannot stress to you how important this is. If you're not investing in your online reputation today, leave this meeting today, sit down with your folks and say, what are we doing? What are we going to do? It's something you can do with your teams. You can certainly use an outsource, you know, someone to help you with that. We help our clients with it, but it's something you can do within your teams as well if you don't, you know, have the capacity to outsource that. And then the fourth thing is, and this is the final thing, remember, always recruit your current fleet, because the reality is someone else is. Every single day we talked about your drivers. If you employ drivers, they are getting some sort of recruiting message in some form or fashion from another fleet. And even if it's not an actual email or a text or a phone call from another fleet, they're seeing it on social media. They're seeing it when they search online. They're seeing it when they watch a YouTube video. They are being encountered by other brands. They are being recruited by other brands every single day. And so you have to make sure that you're constantly recruiting them. All right. So I am going to turn it over to Jeff. I think, Jeff, maybe you want to kind of monitor and let's see if folks have any questions. And remember, you guys, you can ask a question. There's a Q&A window in your Zoom window there, and you can ask a question in that. We can also, if you would like to ask it in the chat, please feel free to do that as well. So we'll see if we have any questions.
So far, no questions. So I'm watching.
Okay, all right. I will say that one of the questions that I get a lot when we talk about online reputation and like how do you manage your online reputation is sometimes people say, you know, how do I actually do that? And so I would say, you know, sit down with your teams and really get a feel for who's monitoring, you know, get a strategy together, basically, not just like, hey, somebody go look at our reviews, you know, really have an actual strategy there.
All right, got a couple questions now coming in.
Okay.
So the first one, can we get a copy of the presentation or deck recording? And I believe the answer to that is yes. I think it's going to go out to everybody on the attendee list with an email address. Okay.
Yes, Cinda, I think that was the
Yes.
case, right?
We can arrange to email it, a PDF copy to everyone by, you know, the end of today or tomorrow.
All right.
And we also recorded it, so we can send you the we have the recording as well.
So next question would be, how has AI impacted hiring, recruiting new drivers?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I will say over the past probably 18 months, it's starting to be significant. And the main area where this is happening, where we're seeing it happening, and we actually have a solution that we work with our clients on, is being able to develop AI platforms where drivers are communicating with your brand. You're capturing that initial short form lead information and without a human. And basically it's, you know, they see your ad. We do it a lot through Facebook Messenger. We have a solution called Lead Assist that does this, and we do it through Facebook Messenger, and it can capture, it's like let's say he either watches a video or he sees an ad, and we say, hey, do you want to chat about this opportunity? And if he just says yes, the bot begins to say, what's your name? Where do you live? You know, what type of driving position are you looking for? And you know, what kind of experience do you have? It can get just some short qualifying questions from the driver. At that point, if there's a recruiter available, these solutions then say, hey, Tammy in recruiting, we have Jeff, he's ready to talk. And Jeff and Tammy connect and she begins chatting. So it transfers it over pretty seamlessly in kind of that AI environment, if you will. It's, I mean, it's really taken off. It's really been helpful for brands that want to kind of compete with larger fleets who have tons of recruiters. In some cases, they're recruiting 24/7. This allows you to be able to do that without the personnel expense. And so I would say AI has definitely impacted recruiting drivers for sure.
Okay. Thanks, Priscilla. Next question. When it comes to a guaranteed pay package, drivers that are kind of dragging their feet, do you have any suggestions on how to manage that kind of situation?
Yeah, this is something that we've heard quite a bit. And I will say this is where I've seen it be successful. When you can, you know, one of the things to keep in mind is, like the data showed earlier, is making sure that it's easily attainable, like not putting guarantees in place that they know they're never going to hit, right? But if you have, but I also think that you can make sure that you put it in the simplest way. So don't overcomplicate it. if you get in a meeting and folks are like, well, they should have to do this, and they should have to do this and this and this, even if you put in place a non-complicated, easy to achieve guarantee model for the driver, if they don't meet that becomes on them. And I think that my biggest advice to carriers related to that would be, make sure you communicate it clearly, make sure it's easy to understand and not complicated, and if those and easily attainable. And if those things are met, then I would say, you know, I mean, it is what it is. If you don't meet these, then, and you're dragging your feet, then, you know, you don't meet the requirements.
Next question. Do you have a sense, Priscilla, if the extension of unemployment benefits, of the federal unemployment benefits, are going to have any bearing on the driver market?
Yeah, we really tried to track that last year as that really became a thing. We don't have any hard data around it, but this is what I can tell you. One of the things that we're seeing in a lot of the carrier surveys that we're getting back is that carriers are saying they are, some of their older tenured drivers are just saying, hey, I'm out. Like, this is great, but I'm just going to retire, and this is a good time for me to get out. But as far as the unemployment benefits go, one of the things that we're seeing is that some fleets are saying that they are having issues competing with what we call gig work. And what I mean by that is, there's, in some cases, drivers are saying, well, I'm going to take the unemployment, or I'm going to take my, you know, my stimulus check even, and I'm going to just drive for DoorDash, or, you know, I'm going to deliver for DoorDash or for Uber Eats, or, you know, those types of what we call gig employment. This whole gig economy that we're in right now, and that's kind of a buzzword with economists. They call it the gig economy. It's a real thing for industries like ours who are aggressively looking for good talent and good drivers. That's something that we are competing against today. And I would say, you know, 18 months ago was not that big of an issue. And so I think definitely there's I don't have hard data for you around that, but I can tell you that carriers are saying they are running into those types of issues.
All right, great. Thank you. One more here, I think. Priscilla, do you have any sense of how many folks, new entrants, are entering the truck driver market this year or in, you know, past years?
I know that CBTA, they always give good data on this. So I would just kind of, I would say check out cbta.org. They always have really good information. That's the Truck Driver School Association, and they really track that data well to see how we're trending. I mean, obviously last year was a complete sugar show, for that's the way to put it. You know, I mean, it was really, really rough. But I will say one of the other things that we're seeing is when it comes to driving opportunities, one of the things that, and it really started happening mid-year last year and into the end of this year into the end of last year, was that carriers were saying, man, I'm losing out to local jobs right and left. Like they had not had an issue where they had like traditional OTR opportunities that they were actually going and saying, I'm taking a local job, even though the pay is not as good, but I need to be home every night because my wife is dying trying to homeschool these kids virtually, blah, 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 all the things. So one of the things that we've seen a lot of carriers do, which I think is really interesting, is over the past 6 months, they're sitting down, you know, and looking at their operations and going, hey, can we be more regionalized? Do we have any opportunities to make some of these driving opportunities be local? do we have any way to adjust our operations where, you know, we can do some more drop and hook or whatever that might look like? Lots of folks are saying, how do I change it to where I can offer opportunities that help the driver where lifestyle is concerned? So I don't know, hopefully that's helpful, but that's kind of what we're seeing.
Hold on a second, getting some more questions here.
I will say, I was going to pull something up really quick. What I did see a stat, they were asking how many people are opting to the truck driver market. I did see a stat, FMCSA, they do like this, you know, this quarterly, here's what's going on thing. And at the end of last year, in that address from the deputy, I can't remember his title, but the main guy at FMCSA, he said that the average age of a truck driver entering the industry was 36. And I was like, whoa, like that seems really high to me. I mean, what that tells us as an industry is we've got to get it together in really recruiting these millennials into our industry. But 36 was the average age of new drivers entering the industry.
Interesting. Do you think the current market conditions for drivers will continue to become more competitive in the near future? I guess short term over the next year.
Yes. Yeah. So this is what I can tell you on that. The historical data that we have for driver recruiting is that January is typically an amazing month, right? What I mean by that is if you look back at the past 10 years of data for recruiting drivers, and we look at lead volume, we look at hires, we look at all of this data for our clients, January is typically a great month. Like we're always high-fiving, great month. We hired what we needed to hire. It was great. 2021, January was brutal. It was tough. February proved to be even tougher. Now, February is typically a tough month to recruit drivers. But when you look historically, January is good. So what that tells us is if January was competitive, if January was super tough, we probably have quite the year ahead of us when it comes to recruiting. So this is a question I literally get every single day. Like, what do you think the market's going to look like? And if I was a betting woman, what I would tell you is I think it's going to remain competitive for a while. I would say at least through the end of the year.
Okay, thank you. So this is always a topic, and somebody has brought it up here again. Obviously, the requirement to drive interstate is 21 years of age. Has there been any talk, or are there any action items coming out of at the federal level of lowering that age limit?
I believe there's a pilot program that FMCSA has, and there may be someone on the line that could put in the chat if I'm right on that. But I'm pretty sure they have a current, and we could all Google it and find out. But I'm pretty sure there's a pilot program that FMCSA has in place regarding that. I don't know the details around it. You're right. I mean, this has always been a hot topic. I feel like it's one of those things that as the market stays competitive for long periods of time, we're going to have to probably have some real conversations around this as an industry more than we have. And I'm certain that it's, you know, something that I know ATA and lots of other organizations that lobby, you know, regarding this, but it is, you know, it is an issue. But I think I'm 90% sure FMCSA has a pilot program right now.
So I'll help you with this one. So yes, there is a pilot program, and there is some traction on this at the federal level. Whether or not that actually becomes a full lowering of the interstate driving age, that remains to be seen. I think a lot needs to be, vetted out with the insurance companies and the regulations and the training of those drivers and the qualifications of drivers that are under 21 that want to drive interstate. Currently, as long as you're under 21, you can drive inside, let's say, the state of Pennsylvania, at the age of 18 with a CDL. You just can't cross state lines. I hope that helps. So I don't see any other questions, but if there are more, I'm sure you can reach out to Priscilla, myself, or Cinda, and we will all figure out a way to get you answers to those questions. So
Absolutely.
Great. I want to thank everybody for attending today and for the great Q&A. And Priscilla, I think you brought a lot of data and unfortunately a lot of reality to what we're all facing in the next year. But it always helps to have data and new actionable ideas.
Well, thank you so much. I enjoyed it. And yeah, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to reach out. This was great hanging out with you guys today.
thanks a lot, Priscilla. We really appreciate it.
It was very informative. Okay, thanks
Thank
everyone. We'll be in
you.
touch with a follow-up email.
Have a good day.